You want to learn about juggling? Brittany Behrens, a corporate attorney for First National Bank of Omaha. She knows how to juggle and juggle very successfully. She's also co-owner of Nebraska Juniors, one of the premier volleyball youth organizations in the state of Nebraska. And she is a co-owner of the Lighthouse Boutique in downtown Ashland, Nebraska. A very charming place you're going to love. How does she do it all? Well, you're going to hear the advice that she will give to entrepreneurs who are in a full-time job, but they want some other opportunities to be an entrepreneur outside of that. She'll walk you through that. She also is going to give some great advice on how to communicate to kids today. As part of the volleyball program, of course, she's surrounded by youth. How do you connect? And how do you deliver constructive criticism, not just to the youth of today, but also to employees? And lastly, she's got a saying, figure bleep out. You'll hear all about how that helps her juggle these three entities. She's amazing, Brittany Behrens. Cannot wait for you to hear the show. And of course, great thanks to Grace Dunbar, our producer, who helps brings it to you. Leadership lesson from Mayberry right here. Well, I'll tell you, I've got my work cut out today because I'm sitting here with Brittany Behrens, who does a little bit of everything, but she does everything exceptionally well. This is going to be a ton of fun today, but we got a lot of ground to cover.
Yeah, we do.
Corporate attorney for First National Bank, also co-founder, co-owner of Nebraska Junior Volleyball Program, one of the preeminent programs in the state. And then you've got a boutique that is setting the world on fire in Little Ashland, Nebraska. So we'll talk about that. But before we do, Brittany, this is how we get going, and this is where the work begins. We start with your Mayberry.
Okay.
And your Mayberry, there's a lot of pins on that Google map, aren't there? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah. So my Mayberry is definitely just straight North Dakota. That's where I grew up. That's still home.
Can hear the accent a little bit.
Yeah, it's there. I have a lot of UFTAs in my vocabulary. Yeah. And so that still is kind of like just my true north. I think there's just a lot of wonderful things about like the peace and kind of like just the slow, calm life. So I think that is a lot of kind of just who I am.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this. Your parents were coaches, but they were your father was an administrator.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So that led you to a lot of different communities. You said, Tim, it's hard for me to pinpoint one because he'd get a principal job, administrative job, right? Move around. I'm always curious, how did you react to that? I mean, there had to be some great highs to that, but then learning to acclimate every 3-4 years, brand new, sets of friends. What was that like? The good and the bad?
Yeah, the good and the bad. I think our parents always told us, right, like this is just an opportunity to meet new people and, find new opportunities and create new experiences. So I think like they set the stage for it to be always kind of finding the positive in it. And I have a lot of people from a lot of different walks of life. I remember when Chase and my husband and I got married, my mom was like, do we have to invite everybody? And I was like, Mom, we've lived in a million places. So
the biggest wedding in Nebraska, was it in Nebraska or was it up in North Dakota?
It was in Lincoln. But I mean, it was over 600 people. But it was people from North Dakota, from Nebraska, from Wyoming, Colorado, that I've done camps traveling all over the country. So it was people from all over.
Yeah. You were just 30 miles from the Canadian border at one point, living up there for a few years. The winters had to be even more harsh. But talk to me about what that allowed you to do as a kid. I want to hear what it was like in the winter times. Normally I say, give me a July night. What was that like? I want to know what it was like 30 miles from the Canadian border in the dead of winter. What did you do to stay busy?
It was cold, but it's all relative, right?
Right.
You get used to it. So it doesn't really feel cold. You're used to 20 below up there. You bundle up and you take the snowmobiles out and you sled off your roofs because the snow is so high. Because it never melts because it never warms up. So, yeah, we spend a lot of time outside, but definitely, doing fun stuff.
But you told me you were a gym rat, yet you're going outside.
Also a gym rat, yeah.
Did it make you tougher? Did it make you tougher?
For sure. I mean, North Dakota, you just have to find stuff to do, right? It's not a super populous state. It's not crazy busy. It's not, there are no thriving metropolises, but you just find stuff to do. I mean, we ice skated, we did all the things. We were in the gym a lot, right? Just simply because my parents were coaches.
Yeah. You told me a great story one time. You said, you helped the basketball team get a lot better because you were one of these little tykes that was in the gym, a gym rat at a young age. And when your parents were having their players run lines in basketball, you would get on the shoulders of these players and they would carry you up and down to run lines to make it a little more challenging. So I got to hear about that.
Yeah, I was a basketball kid. My dad was the boys basketball coach in the town that we were all born and raised in. And I spent every after school day in the gym and for as long as I can remember. And yeah, those boys, they ran all their lines with me on their shoulders. I took a lot of naps in the bleachers, right? I mean, I still love popcorn and hot dogs, and concession stands make me happy.
I know that smell, right? When it starts to waft through the gym, it's like, oh man, the popcorn it just sets the scene for an event. But when you look back at those days and you think about, all the time you had there been video games like there are today, do you think, you and your family, would you have been surrounded, or would you always have found a way to get outside and just stay active? Why is that? Why were you so active?
Yeah. So, I think my family is all I just grew up with just doers, right? My grandma taught my mom to golf. My mom taught me to golf. My mom taught my dad to golf, right? We just are doers. And so, same thing with my kids. If they have free time, they want to go play catch. They want somebody to rebound for them. It's kind of just all we know is being in the gym, running around, go.
Yeah. And one of the things you shared with me too, even today, your kids are with you, whether it's at the boutique, doing some stuff around there, whether it's at Nebraska Juniors, in the gym. You make sure they're involved with what you do today. And again, I've got to imagine that's just a pull from what you knew growing up.
Absolutely. Yeah. We always went to all of the home games, away games. We spent a lot of time on the bus. So it's no different, right? My daughter knows how to pack an activity bag, and, she brings her jump rope in her backpack, and she can go find a corner in the gym or go pass against the wall. So it's kind of, again, all we know.
Yeah. So here you are today. You've got your hands in three, you work in corporate America. You've got your hand in a couple of other businesses. Was there ever a point growing up in North Dakota or after you moved to Beatrice, which is where you graduated from high school, what set you on fire when it came to business? What set you on fire? Was there something back in the day? Did it click then? Did it come later?
I had a really, really great business teacher in high school, Mr. Langford. He was wonderful. And so that was kind of the spark. My dad, when he taught before he went into administration, was a business teacher. So accounting, finance, econ, kind of just business, entrepreneur stuff was kind of always in my blood. And I took some great business law classes in high school. So that's what led me down the path of law school. But I went with the intention of being in college athletic administration. That's what I wanted to do, is be a college AD or, work in a NCAA kind of compliance department. So that was the plan. It just so happened that when I graduated law school with a little bit of debt, I had a pretty good actual lawyer opportunity. And so I went into practice right away. And yes, sometimes you just you keep trudging ahead. Right.
So you go into law, but there's still that burning desire, it sounds like, to do something on an entrepreneurial front.
Yep.
So what was that? What was that itch that you had to scratch that you said, hey, I've got to chase this a little bit?
Yeah, so was
it more business? And I'm going to interrupt. Was it a business or was it more about service?
A little bit of both, right? So I think that most of my kind of business desire came probably from the club volleyball side and seeing kind of the business side of that. But philosophically, we're a nonprofit and we are really a peer service organization. Most of our coaches are high school teachers and high school coaches. And we do it because we love the game and we love to teach kids. But there's pieces of that are just still big business, right? Youth sports is a huge business. And so that kind of fills that bucket. And then the apparel side and the boutique, what actually kind of started that was I started carrying a lot of apparel with me when I traveled around the country doing volleyball camps. And again, filled a need and saw that was something in Ashland that there was just kind of an open space. And I thought that maybe, we could fill that need there. And the women's clothing side of it and the athletic apparel are both things that kind of spun out of prior volleyball experiences, really.
Yeah. And so I'm going to break it down for everyone. Make sure that everyone's got it straight. This is good. You get your degree in law. You start out, and your first couple of positions, you're working for county entities, state entities, right?
Yep.
But then you move into a corporate position. So let's start there, because I want to kind of weave that in.
Sure.
To then getting your hands involved with youth sports at the highest level, and then this boutique. So let's start with First National. Yeah. Why the transition into corporate versus what you were doing prior to that?
I have always been kind of searching for an environment where everybody is highly motivated, self-motivated, self-starters, and and there's some reward for said hard work. Yeah. So corporate America at the time kind of fit that bill, but also was a place that is privately owned, great family history in Omaha, really big service organization, and a flexible workplace. So I wanted work-life balance, I think, is a hard term, but I wanted the ability to kind of do all the things. And First National is a place that is that it's encouraged. So that's kind of what landed me there. It was a perfect opportunity at the time.
Yeah, and you don't just you don't ever do anything halfway. You go to one of the best and most preeminent banks, right, in the state. So you sought that out, or was that intentional on your end?
Yeah, it's a very well-known organization, and the work that they were looking for at the time, the opening, was fit squarely with kind of my skill set from my prior job. They were looking for somebody to kind of manage their employment law and their corporate contracts division, and that was my bucket of work before for the county. And so it was just kind of taking the experience that I had and shifting it into a very different workplace with a very different workforce. But it was good. It was a challenge, but a different type of challenge than I had at the county, but very similar work.
I think what stands out about this interview when you and I talked is there are so many people out there that are working in their job, right? Doing a great job with their job, but they want something else too, right? They want to get involved with a hobby, a passion. So when did Nebraska Juniors, this is going to be about how that entrepreneur manages all of that, the stuff on the side, the things that are very important and passionate you're about, but how you obviously balance it all. So when did the idea of Nebraska Juniors kind of start bouncing around your head? And did you form that from the ground up?
Nope, I didn't. So Nebraska Juniors has been around for about 30 years. It was started by Jake Moore, right? A legendary, pious, now Omaha Marion high school volleyball coach, and kind of just bootstrapped it with a bunch of other high school coach friends. And then Gwen Egbert, right? Another Nebraska volleyball legend, took it over probably, I'd say 10 years in, and kind of ran it as a sole prop for a number of years with the same staff. And then I came on staff. So I played for Nebraska Juniors while I was in high school, and then I came on staff my senior year of college. And so this year is my 16th year with Nebraska Juniors. And it was about in 2017 that we kind of, as an organization, our entire staff decided that we needed to kind of take things more from a board mentality and kind of bring all of our coaches to the table instead of, and so we reformed from a legal perspective the organization and set up a nonprofit. And I worked through the legal work for us to do that. And we have a 9-member board. It is coaches that have been with Nebraska Juniors for years. Jake's still on the board. Gwen's still on the board, right? Some of your most prominent Nebraska coaches. And in 2018, we were looking kind of just for a director. And I was hoping we could find somebody else so that I could just continue coaching and helping run the youth side of Nebraska Juniors, but that didn't come to fruition.
They pulled you in, didn't they?
So here I am.
They saw talent. Here's the deal. What a lot of people may not know, except those that have known you for many, many years, you had an opportunity and went to Creighton to play. So your passion, you were not just playing your typical high school volleyball. You get an offer to go on scholarship to Creighton University. So this is where when did volleyball become such a big part of your life? I mean, were you a little one and you're like, volleyball's it?
No, basketball was it.
Yeah.
Right? I was a basketball girl. I was in the gym with Dad. Mom was coaching volleyball, but my sister was more of the volleyball girl. It probably wasn't until my sophomore year of high school. And like, truth be told, it's because my basketball shot was broken. Like, I
couldn't be fixed. Jake Mose couldn't fix that.
I no longer could make a basket. So I just decided to kind of pour my energy into volleyball. And yeah, we started going to the gym every day all summer, and they were refinishing the floors, and we would take buckets and set up a net on the carpet in kind of the cafeteria. And there we went. So I set thousands of balls.
Yeah. And your parents were basketball coaches. So how did they handle this transition where volleyball became your love?
Yeah. So my mom was actually my high school volleyball coach. But my mom was also a All-American college athlete. So basketball, track, like
Where at now?
Mom was a stud, Valley City State.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, so mom at the time, I think, was probably just waiting for me to make that transition to volleyball and kind of find that spark. And so I think my dad was probably slightly disappointed, but it was still the gym.
What was it like playing for your mom? You've said some of your most important leadership lessons came from your parents. So I want to know, obviously I've coached my son in youth sports, so I have an idea of what it is from the parental side, but what is it like from the daughter side when mom's coaching you?
I've always been lots of eye contact with my coaches, like just kind of watching kind of body language feedback. So, I don't know if that comes from my parent being my coach or just kind of how I am. So I catch all of it, right? So there's pieces of it that were hard, but again, all I really ever knew, like my parents coached us in everything growing up, and they were always the coaches wherever we lived. And so it's kind of just what you did. So, I hear a lot of people say when their kids get to high school, they transition out of coaching because their kids don't want to play for them. That was just never really an opportunity, right? They were going to be our coaches. And so it probably led to more tough conversations.
Like what? Give me one example of a tough conversation that you went through.
I remember very vividly my junior year of high school. We had a lot of really talented freshmen, and we were rated pretty high in the state. And I was coming back off of like a good sophomore season, playing some big club, and I dumped the ball a million times during the game. And I was a setter, right? So I didn't set my hitters. I attacked multiple times to score. And after the game, I remember my mom just laying into me that, like, we won't get any better. We won't win when it matters, right? Like these young players, and I was like, they make errors. Like they don't put it in play. Like I scored.
I love it. Oh, mom is pulling you back in here a little bit.
Yeah, and I got my ass chewed.
Yeah. How did you handle that though?
Oh, I was mad.
Yeah.
But she wasn't wrong.
Yeah.
And I knew that, right? And I think that was probably the most frustrating part of the conversation was I knew she was right. And that was probably right, like after having conversations about, right, like I knew when we'd had conversations about how leaders make the people around them better, right? Like that is the leader's job. And so I think that was right, a little bit of like she was disappointed, right? That like my job is to do whatever it takes to drag everybody else, right? And make them better every step of the way.
Yeah.
And so that was probably the hardest thing, is the disappointment.
How long do you think it took you to figure out that she was right? I mean, is that one of those things where you compliant, you went back the next day and said, you know what, man, mom's got a great point? Or is that something when you're 26, you're looking back and say, how smart was she?
I think I figured it out maybe a little bit throughout the season, but I was primarily just mad.
Little bullheaded and stubborn.
Yeah.
So one of the toughest things you ever had to go through is, the great news is you end up getting a scholarship to Creighton. But at some point you make a decision, Division I volleyball is not for me. Walk me through what was going on for you to come to that decision and how difficult that was for you.
Oh, absolutely. this is a big one, and we talk about it a lot in my house with our kids, right? Because like you don't get to quit when things are hard. But I did. And it's a little bit of, right, like life lesson looking back. So going into my junior season, I knew they were bringing in another setter. And I had started every match of my entire career at Creighton, and we'd really kind of turned things around. Like the program was making huge strides. They were 5-23. So Kirsten Booth was.
Was that her?
I was her first recruit.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So her first season at Creighton was my freshman year. Yeah. So she was young, 28 at the time, right? Big D1 job, and so I think we both have learned a lot. And so they brought in another setter. We had conversations in the off season about they were going to look kind of at all options, and went into the season, and I didn't set any balls. And they put me at the libero position from the beginning of the season. And I think more than anything, right, I was 19. Like I was frustrated. It wasn't the position I wanted to play. So probably a little bit of youth. But I also, looking back, right, we all could have handled it better, right? So we had lots of conversations, my parents, the coaching staff, the administration, about kind of where we were. And we battled through 10 matches in the season my junior year. And it just, I lost a lot of faith and a lot of trust in their communication. And I think they thought that I probably was simply handling it poorly, which I probably was. I was 19. So it probably was not a great combination. And I'm not sure from a volleyball perspective, Creighton was probably never a great fit for me.
Because?
This is a hard
toughie?
one.
All right.
This is a toughie. From my perspective at the time, it wasn't a very blue-collar volleyball program. And Nebraska Juniors at its core is just like hardworking, gritty, like teach the fundamentals, no flash, no fancy. And that's what I knew volleyball to be, right? Like you just battle and you work hard and it doesn't have to be pretty. And Creighton's volleyball program at the time was kind of a little prima donna-ish. And that's just not how I had ever played. I don't think that's probably true of the program today, but it's kind of who they were at the time. And so that just wasn't a great fit. And I probably would have, had I stayed, I probably would have said the same thing. But volleyball was such a huge part of my life that I couldn't be miserable and quit and let that be the last experience. So, So, I mean, we just had a lot of conversations middle of the season, and it was just not a good, healthy situation for the rest of the team. Me, again, I had lost a lot of, trust and respect in the coaches, and like, that's not fair.
Right. So when you look back on this, there are so many lessons to take, right? You get both sides of it, because you can look at it as leaders. They probably did some things right in that situation, but they also probably did some things you're like, hey, as a business owner or a business leader, I'm going to make sure not to do that. At the same time, you learned a lot about yourself. Some things you handled well, some things you didn't. But when you look at, I want to just focus on both sides. What did you take away as a pivotal lesson for you that when you get in that role, a business leader or business owner, of some things you learned from that you wanted to make sure that you either A, didn't make the same mistake, or B, it was just a learning lesson for you to bring into the business world?
Transparency, communication, huge. Like those are two big takeaways I have. And Kirsten and I have had conversations about this, right? Like I'm still very, very intertwined into her world and her mind. So her and I have had conversations about the things that, right, could have been different or right on both sides. Right. So I think communication and transparency from a leadership perspective would have helped. And from my side, right, I think now I know exactly why they did what they did, but they should have just told me.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, they were bringing in a freshman setter who probably her upside was bigger than mine, right? 6 inches bigger than mine.
That doesn't hurt either, right?
Right. So had I known that, and had I been walked through kind of, this is our vision for the team long term, and this is why, maybe it would have been different. I typically tell her, and I would tell Kirsten this, like, I probably would have just left earlier, right? I would have left before the season, and it would have been a better experience and transition for me. And it would have been better for the team, right? Because me leaving was icky, for everybody.
You know, the reason I spend some time on this is because I work with small businesses, right? And transparency is sometimes it's just hard for business owners, right? When I go in and I interview employees, probably the number one thing I hear is lack of communication, right? I don't know what's going on. I don't always know what they're thinking. Now you've had some experience, which we all go through, right? In life, we learn this is how we get better. I just think that's such an important point that business owners oftentimes, why do you think they are reluctant sometimes as business leaders and business owners? And you've been there. You've worn that hat. Why is it hard sometimes to be transparent and to communicate at a high level with employees?
Because I think most of the time those are hard conversations because you're being critical or you're giving criticism, even if it's constructive. And that's hard to give, partly because it's hard for people to take, right? But I'm a firm believer in have the hard conversation, right? If you're not happy with your employee and they're probably not super happy in the position if they're not succeeding either. And so have the hard conversation and address it head on, right? Everybody will be better because of it. It might be painful, but
without a doubt. And that is just the bare bones of it. But here's something that I think you share. I've had the luxury of interviewing now 15 to 18 business owners and business leaders. There is one thread that is constant throughout everyone, and that is their work ethic. The only way you can balance a boutique, Nebraska Juniors, First National Bank of Omaha is you have to have work ethic. And it's a secret that is out there that everyone can have. It's very controllable, right? So tell me from your perspective the value of work ethic, because this is one of your keys and how you balance these three entities.
I think it's huge. If I instill nothing else in my children, I want them to work hard and I want them to be grateful, right? I think hard work it's definitely something that can be learned. But I also think some of it is innate, right? Some people just, one of my friends calls it my motor, right? My motor is it's just on go. So I think that's part of it, but I definitely think that just over time, right? Seeing, you can accomplish really, really great things simply by kind of putting your head down and just working hard.
Hey, we're taking a little break in the show to make sure you know about Farmers and Merchants Bank of Ashland. Not many banks have been around for 139 years, but Farmers and Merchants Bank of Ashland has. And why? Because they offer full-service business banking, and you'll always speak to a live human being when you give them a call at Farmers and Merchants Bank of Ashland. They're commercial lenders. They are more than happy to share their expertise and to help you navigate any business financing that you may need, including SBA, TIF, or Nedco financing. So go to fmnb.com. Right below me, you're going to see that website, or give them a call at 402-944-3316. Member FDIC and equal housing lender. And getting through it, you have something called, oh golly, I got to quote this right because this is such a great line. You have something called my figure out thing. What do I want to say? It's not thing.
Figure out skill. That's what we call it. We call it a skill.
So where did that come from? How do you think that got instilled in you? Because you cut through problems very quickly because you can figure S out, right?
Yep.
Tell me about that a little bit.
Oh, that's
where do you think that came
from? It's probably a combination of both my mom and my dad. They look at problems and attack things super differently. But both very quick problem solvers, but dad much more analytical, structured, like gonna make a plan. And my mom is just like look at it and dive in. No plan. Just go.
Right.
So very different. So that's part of it, right? I think that innate, right? Like learned by watching. And then I think that law school really, it doesn't teach you to be a lawyer or, to know what you're doing as an attorney day one. It teaches you how to solve problems, right? Like how to think like a lawyer, right? And so I think that's a huge part of it is like I have probably honed that over time simply in practice as an attorney.
Yeah. This has been a massive week for, I think, women in the state of Nebraska, frankly, women everywhere, because leave it up to sports, right, to set a world record in attendance for a women's athletic event last Wednesday. And by the way, I shouldn't say last Wednesday on a podcast because someone might listen to this 6 months from now and go, what? It was just last Wednesday? Anyway, yes. But I'm always curious. I mean, you are a tough woman. You're a smart woman. And obviously, when you look back to what happened last Wednesday, this is I called my daughter, who's down at University of Florida. I'm like, this is a great day for women. And most importantly, shows what can be accomplished. But as a woman leader, do you believe that there's more of an onus, there's more of a spotlight on you as a woman leader, or do you feel like you're totally unencumbered? And it's just you. I mean, you don't even think in terms of that.
Yeah, I don't. Never had a huge chip on my shoulder, like based on gender. I think you kind of just do what you do, right? No matter what. Now, I do think that, right, there are some impediments, but I think they're all obstacles that we can overcome. And I think that was evident, right? Like you give women the stage and they will do amazing things.
Right.
Yeah.
And by the way, should Creighton have been involved last Wednesday or in the big deal? I got to ask you this. Normally I'd save this for the end. But
I don't think there's much benefit to Creighton or Nebraska playing on that stage, right? With the elements, right? It's not an actual great volleyball environment. It was a great experience and a great environment for people and the stage. But from a volleyball wins and losses perspective, that wouldn't have been good for either Nebraska or Creighton. Nebraska would have not much to gain, and it would be a hard environment for Nebraska or for Creighton to beat Nebraska in.
And by the way, I think it's absolutely legitimate when Coach Cook says, "Look, we could have had a ton of wind. We could have had some really bad weather, and there was a little wind anyway. You saw some the ball's knuckling a little bit.
Yeah,
at times.
The flags were a whipping.
Absolutely. But I also think it's a compliment to Creighton because you got to win that match. You cannot have volleyball day in Nebraska and get beat. And I'm not saying that Coach Cook is certainly not afraid of getting beat, but you can't take that risk on that kind of night.
Not that
what did that mean to you, though? What did that mean? I talked to someone who played athletics in 1978, didn't get an opportunity to play volleyball, played about 8 basketball games a year. Didn't come till her sophomore year. She was in tears when I talked to her the next morning. And I said, "Why are you crying?" She said, "Because of how far it's come." And she was an amazing track athlete. Would have probably been an all-stater in basketball and volleyball. Good size, great athlete. So what did that mean to you? Was it just a volleyball match, or did it mean something much bigger than that for you?
Oh, yeah. No, super, super cool experience for, I think, people who have played at Nebraska and any of those colleges, before, to see, again, how far it's come, right?
Yeah.
Because, they were the foundation of that. And then I think, for me, even cooler for the youth and the people, my daughter, who's 8, and the club players that we have, 10 through 18. Super cool for them to see, the possibilities. And I always am a huge proponent of volleyball because I think that it is probably the women's sport that allows females to look the most athletic, right? Because of how we perform. And I mean, it's a skill sport, it's a finesse sport, but we look athletic doing it. So I'm a huge fan, right, of giving women that stage, because we we look damn good playing volleyball.
Darned right. And I'll tell you, two professional teams coming to Omaha, Nebraska.
Yeah, so cool.
I kind of laugh at that because I'm like, really, the real professional team, University of Nebraska.
Yes.
I mean, it's going to be hard to take their stage. But nonetheless, wow, it's going, and Omaha is at the heart of it. Why? You know what? That gives me another thought. I'm bouncing around, Brittany. But why Omaha? Why are is it just the University of Nebraska? Is it the stuff that you're doing with Nebraska Juniors and the way that, I mean, it is really ingrained in the culture of our society in this state. I mean, every young lady I know, seems to really love the game of volleyball. Why are two professional teams looking at Omaha, Nebraska?
Yeah, so I think it's the tradition, right? We have some of the best coaches in the country. Nebraska Juniors has been one of the most successful club programs in the country. We haven't been as successful in recent years, but it's simply because there's been more clubs that have popped up that are doing really great things. Like there's just more opportunities for kids, which is great. Like that's good for kids. But I do think kind of the longevity of some of our best coaches in the state. And then our fans are ridiculous. Like people just love volleyball here. So I think that's the following, right? The just history of good volleyball here. And you've got Wayne State, you've got UNK, Doan's been great for years, Midland, right? I mean, Chadron State, Hastings has won some national champion, right? You have this like history across the state of some amazing volleyball programs. And then, I know this because I just have some insight into kind of the professional and like U.S. level scene. A huge part of it is cost of living for the athletes. That's a huge driver. Yeah, right?
Never even thought about that. Absolutely.
Yeah. So,
here's another thread that you told me when we talk about leadership lessons. You said, look, hard work, and it is at the foundation of every good business leader, business owner. But something else you said to me before we came on, you said, it's also surrounding yourself with great people. And here, again, 3 entities you're involved in. You can't do this unless you have great people around you. But then the question, what is it you look for? How do you know that they are that great person that can help you grow your organization?
Yeah. So probably people with similar work ethic, right? Like, that they're just going to be in it until they figure it out, right? Like it has to be somebody that's just willing to not give up and kind of just go. But it's also, right, people that are loyal. I think loyalty is huge to me, and that probably is something I've learned from volleyball and from coaching, right? And then people that kind of have the same value system, I'd say, right? That like their family is important to them. The way they treat people is important to them. So I think it's probably some of those same characteristics that shine through in all of those things.
There's a lot of business owners out there going, this is awesome. This is great. But how do I find that out? Especially in today's hiring world where you can't sit very long on a candidate. How do you peel that onion back even more so to say, all right, values are important, their work ethic, their loyalty, all this. How do you determine that?
So, I think word of mouth and talking to people that you trust that have connections or that know people, right? I still, firmly believe it's not what you know, it's who you know. There's obviously a little what you know. But
most people can be trained, right?
Yeah, they can. If they have the right skill set, you can. Like, you can bring them along. In a lot of cases. So I think, like that work ethic and that accountability, right, is huge, right? But you have to ask around. You have to ask people that you trust for referrals. And we talk about that a lot in work and in business all the time, that, right, finding the right people it's the magic.
Right. And I would imagine that is one of the key elements on how you're able to juggle all of this, correct? Yeah. So here's another thought I thought when we chatted, because I've seen you in action. We both live in Ashland, by the way. And you're an amazing mother. Chase, great husband, right? I know he's very involved as well. You can tell him he needs to improve his golf game a little bit. But I know
more practice, Chase. Oh, yeah.
That's all he wanted, right? Actually, he's a great golfer. A lot better golfer than me. But one of the things that you've done is you've really incorporated your family, right, into this. I'm like, how do you juggle all of this? And you're like, look, the lessons I learned from my parents and then juggling and bringing your kids in. Was that intentional or was that just out of necessity?
Intentional, right? I mean, like I said, like if I do nothing else, I want hardworking and grateful children.
Yeah.
But I think that comes right with like understanding what it takes, right, to run a business and to pay for a house and to pay for right, like all those things. Like they have to understand that. And I learned those same lessons, right? So, and I like spending time with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. So that's a huge part of it too, is like, I want them to enjoy the things I enjoy, but I also want them to find things that they enjoy, so that we can do those things together too. It just so happens we're lucky that they're sports kids, right? They like to be in the gym. They like to be active. We spend a lot of time outside. So, yeah.
Yeah. You know, so many of the things that you've learned in business that have made you good in business seem to emanate from your history of being in sports. Mm-hmm. And give me one or two things that you say, absolutely, sport gave me this that has helped made me successful. Mm-hmm. What are one or two values that have come from that?
Yeah. So I think building rapport, right? Like my people skills probably are like straight tied to sports, right? And primarily because I played mostly team sports, right? I was a basketball, volleyball kid. I played a little bit of tennis in high school simply because I wasn't fast and nobody wanted me to run track. So
you weren't recruited for that, huh?
No. Yeah, but so building rapport with teammates, right, is 100% transferable to the workplace. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's been huge. And then I think like taking constructive criticism, right, it's really hard for young people today. And I think sports squarely teach you that skill, right?
Yeah.
To learn, to take feedback and to take it as a positive, right? Like what are you telling me that can make me better, right? Like how can I do it better? Even if I didn't do it poorly, what can I change to do it better the next time? To be more efficient, to make more money, whatever it is, right? Like those are all things that are transferable to owning a business.
I had a professor once in college. His name was Wheeler Dixon. And you had to run your draft of your big paper that you had to write at the end of the semester for your class by him. And I took my paper in, and he read it for about 5 minutes. He crumpled it up, and he threw it away. And he said, "This is terrible." I ended up getting an A on that, but he was absolutely one of my favorite professors. So I got to ask you, Brittany, are we getting older when we say, youth has a hard time taking criticism, or do they want it? Do they really want it, but they want it in the right way?
It's probably a combination of both. Mm-hmm. I think that the way we have to communicate to kids today needs to be different, right? But
in what way?
In what way?
How do you think it's different today than it was?
I think probably not. I think you still need to be straightforward, right? But probably with more kid gloves, right? Mm-hmm. Like it probably needs to be constructive criticism with a more positive spin, right? Mm-hmm. Where I got yelled at and probably told I was terrible more than once, right? And that's not actually what my coach or my teacher or my meant, but that's just the way that you communicated back when I, was a student and an athlete and what have you. So I think it's just simply delivery that needs to change and that has changed. And I don't know if that is a product of, parenting or what it is, right? But I know that it's different.
Yeah. I once had a boss tell me, you can say anything you want as long as you say it the right way, right? Mm-hmm. So as a boss, as a business owner, is that it? Is the key? Because look, I see kids today. There's a coach that I know very well who's tough. He'll give them, but he gives them a lot of love. And the way he delivers it oftentimes isn't maybe the way I got it. And the 80s, you're quite a bit younger than me, but sometimes we just got it, handed to us, right? Mm-hmm. Is that the key for a business owner? It's all in delivery. Take 5 seconds. What advice would you give to them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it needs to be more of a conversation, right? More conversational and you're kind of frame of reference when you have those conversations with your employees is like, okay, like how can I show you in a way that you're going to understand, right? And kind of like taking the accountability on you as the leader, as the owner of, okay, like I have to find a way to, message or kind of show you how to do this or, change my tone so that it's a way that you can understand it or you're listening, right? Because if my tone isn't, what you want it to be, you simply won't listen. So I think tone and delivery is probably key. And people miss, I think, from a leadership perspective, miss on that all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
So, boutique. Let's talk about that. We've spent some time on volleyball. You've got this boutique called Lighthouse Boutique, downtown Ashland. It's got some golf shirts, but it's got a lot of other cool things in there. But again, you talked a little bit about starting to sell some merchandise at volleyball events. But was this a passion that you had? I mean, in seventh grade, would you have said, I'm going to own a boutique someday? Or did it come up recently and you see it more of a business acumen, where, hey, there's an opportunity here? A little bit of both.
Probably was a law school venture, right? So one of my good friends in law school, this was something we talked about, like, when we get done with law school, why would we ever be lawyers, right? Like we'll have all the tools and we'll know how to problem solve and we can figure anything out. And a lot of lawyers just simply run businesses, right? And so we talked about a lot of business ventures throughout law school. And so that's kind of where the brainchild came to be. And then over the years, I gained experience on the apparel side and the retail side, simply from, my volleyball work. But yeah, it was more so, okay, it was always in the back of my mind. And a little bit of like, can I do this? Right. Yeah. So there was just, I knew there was a need in Ashland. And so that's kind of what sparked okay, I always had this interest. Can I do it? What the hell? Let's just do it.
I love it. So that was it as much as anything, that challenge, that internal challenge to say, I want to see if I can knock this out. Because boutiques, I mean, there's a lot of them, right?
There are.
You've got to differentiate yourself. How did you come up with the idea of this is what, look, there's one thing to say, I'm going to start a boutique. There's another thing to say, it's a crowded market. I've got to stand out. So here's my vision. How'd you come up with that? And what is your vision?
Yeah. So it's a little bit of like contemporary women's like staple clothing pieces, like really high quality, long lasting kind of pieces you can wear over and over and over again. So we have, lots of kind of jackets, blazers, pieces that kind of stand the test of time, good high quality, lots of great denim. And then also just some like specialty pieces, right, that you can wear to like special events or things like that.
Sure. But what gets you to that point? Like, I'm always curious when you sit down and say, this is what I want it to be. This is going to be the what.
Yep.
But to have that vision to say, this is what I'm going to create. We'll put the clothes in there, but at that starting point to say, this is what it's going to look like.
Yeah. So I think for the biggest thing for me was like, what do I want my shopping experience to look like? And like, what would make my life easier, right? As a working mom in corporate America, that was probably the kind of the catalyst, was more that piece of kind of what would simplify people's life in my demographic. Yeah.
I like it. I like it. All right. Couple more questions along this line. There are a lot of entrepreneurs out there that, again, they're working a job. They have this idea. They have this boutique idea. They have something. And they want to do it. What advice would you give to them to say, here's how we're going to put this all together? Here's how, if I could give you advice from ground or step one, so that you're going to do something on the side, you're going to do something at night, what would that advice be to them?
Do your homework. My first piece of advice would be definitely do your homework and do a lot of research, right? Like figure out the numbers, the inner workings, talk to a lot of people that are already successful in the space. I was fortunate that I had a lot of good connections of people that had either like law school friends that have done this, right, that have opened retail stores, or other people that I knew. So I had good resources, but use your resources, I would say, for sure. And then like figure out what your vision is. And we were pretty clear on that from day one. Like, like what is the problem you're trying to solve, right? Like what is the gap or the need? And then put together a plan that like squarely solves it, right?
The other thing I think is interesting is when you've got, multiple entities that you're involved in. You already talked about Nebraska Juniors and how it's a kind of a blue collar, bring your lunch pail kind of league. And it's about making them as good of people as it is volleyball players. What values go across all three? First National, Nebraska Juniors, and the boutique. What values kind of emanate through all three or run through all three of those?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that like I see some like simple blue collar in all of them, right? Some like not flashy, just people that like come to work, they work hard. It's not about the accolades or the anything, right? It's about kind of simply feeling good about the work you do, regardless of what anyone else thinks. Like that runs true through all of them. Is like, we're going to do this and make it successful because that makes us feel good. Yeah. So that's probably a huge part of it. And then I'd say they all like just really, really good, solid people, right? In all of those organizations, right? That have, faith, family, and hard work kind of at their core. And so that's true of all of them also.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm going to tell you, you have a fascinating story. You have a busy story. You are the ultimate juggler, but you've got all the balls in the air and you're doing an awesome job with it. And it is just continued success for you. And I'm so thrilled that we got you on the show. So
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.